people don't pay me to be their cheerleader. They want cheerleading, which is cool. And I don't mind being their cheerleader, but I usually make the joke and warn them, if you're looking for a cheerleader, call your mama. Anybody that works with me is paying me to be the most honest person they've ever had a conversation with. Mm-hmm. And to believe beyond their own bullshit about what they can't do.
What was one time in your life that you manipulated yourself for so long? How did you identify it? How did you get out of it?
I went to an AA meeting and talked to all these guys, and in a room full of 15 dudes at a cafe in Beverly Hills. And this guy named Neil, he leaned over to me and said, the most scary idea I'd ever heard. He had like these throat issues, and he just said, share how you feel. I thought, you don't want to hear how I feel, man.
Welcome back to Flipping the Lid. You know what we do here by now, and I just continue to be further and further impressed by the depth at which our guests continue to go. You know, we've had so many amazing conversations yesterday, and I've also had a lot of feedback from you as listeners saying that you've seen the evolution in the show where it continues to get deeper. Today, we have a really special individual with us. We were talking pre-show, and honestly, I don't even remember how we were connected. But what I do know is that he was on my other show, and it was an immediate connection. I felt the depth. I felt the resonance. I felt his frequency out of the gate. And our conversation only continued to get deeper. See, he's an individual who leads as a senior partner in an executive coaching firm called Take New Ground. But he's a human. He's somebody who's traveled. He sees people. He understands the work that needs to be done. And the way that he communicates about transformation, healing, and ultimately allowing people to understand the science of leadership is what's allowed him to separate from the crowd. So I can't wait to jump in with you, my friend. And for those of you that are listening, Adrian Koehler, let's get rocking, brother.
Hey, man. So good to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate that. So I gave a very, very, very brief intro based on the very little bit I know about you and what I know you do. But sure. The one question I ask every single guest on this show is, who are you in your words?
Oh, wow. In my words, human being, in that sense, have tons of amazing attributes and tons of not amazing attributes. I'm a mixed bag. Which I've discovered more and more over time. And that's been a phenomenal discovery instead of trying to be somebody that the world needed me to be, which would be like the first, 35 years of my life. So human being that is 100% committed to making it count, whatever the it is, like making the moment count, making the conversation count, making the meeting count, or making this time together count. I'm a dad. I've got a boy and a girl, 10-year-old boy, almost 8-year-old girl. That's the most honorable calling in my life. I am a fierce advocate for people, which it took me, almost 4 decades to really fully own that's like my superpower. And the hill I'm going to die on, the thing I think about all the time, the saw that never quite gets sharp enough, which is fun. Because, my ability to connect with other people is 100% connected to my ability to connect with myself and lead myself. So, something like that.
You brought it, bro. I love the depth in the answer already. And I mean, there's about 12 things you said in there that I can extrapolate and go further on. One thing that I'll say, and I'm not sure if we covered this when we were together on my live show, but you and I are very, very resonant as it relates to the state of life we're in. I've got a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old girl.
Cool.
And I often say that being a dad is hands down, no questions asked, the most difficult thing I've ever done, but it's also the most meaningful.
Sure.
Right. And
100%.
And what I've found, at least in my experience, is that my kids truly are my greatest coaches.
Yeah.
And they've been probably the greatest mirror and reflection that I've ever existed with in my life to really be able to see it real time. And so given the depth at which I felt the answer of you being a father, I want to start there.
Yeah.
Could you give a little bit of insight into what are the reflections and how have your kids operated as a mirror for you in the last 10 years?
Sure. Oh, wow. Okay. Big answer to that. Let's see. The first thing that came to mind, which I have a little, I was going to say a little bit of shame about. I don't know. It's a learning moment for me. So my kids, let's see. I got a call from my ex-wife. I'm no longer married to their mom. Got a call from their ex-wife that the kids had a round of head lice Which, whatever, young kids. And it's not, we've had another round before, and I'll leave out some of the unimportant details. But as we sit down together to deal with this, and she knows how to stretch a dollar. There's a place in town you can go, which we did before, which was awesome, but now their prices are like insane. And so she wants to do it ourselves. Okay, not my preference, but I will do this. Okay, fine. So anyway, I'm sitting there and I'm treating my son's head. She's treating my daughter's head. I think I've got the deal because he's got less hair. And then I realize, and then I do all the process, and I'll save everybody from details, but it's revealed that he has a lot of lice going on in his head. And what hit me was he didn't tell me about it. He had told his mom that his head was itching. He didn't tell me about it. And that's feedback for me, thinking, I wonder why. And we're going to have the conversation. I wanted to give it a couple of days so it's not so fresh for him. But there's like something missing in the relationship from me to him, that he wouldn't say, hey, Dad, I'm feeling weird. My head's feeling weird. That could be several things. It might be he didn't think I'd care, or, I'm kind of a pick up, get yourself out of the dirt, like a very much of a challenger dad. Believe in them, like, hey, let's go. You got it, which I think is part of the masculine calling to be that as well. But there's something missing in the relationship. So your question was like, what have I reflected on myself? Like, I can easily be so hard charging and be so mission driven that I can miss some connection points. Or I'm coaching his baseball team, which is awesome, and which when I got asked to coach, I got asked by the league to coach a team, which is a big honor to me. And then I brought it to him. Hey, do you want me to do it? His name is Scout, and he's a badass. Because my dad was the coach, and for me and my brother, I'm the youngest of two brothers. And I had a mixed relationship with that, because it was like cool to have your dad there all the time. My dad is awesome, school teacher for 40 years. He and my mom just celebrated 50-year anniversary, and my brother and I threw a surprise party for him back in my hometown of 7,000 people in the middle of nowhere in Southern Illinois. And he's like my dad's like the George Bailey of my hometown. It's amazing. But I got plenty of judgments about him. Of course, we can get into those later if you'd like. That was meant to be a joke. Sorry, it didn't land. Anyway.
Gotcha.
But
I was just letting you roll, man. I was like, well, if you're judging your dad, that's cool. We'll talk about that.
I'm just playing. I've worked on that stuff. My point being is that, I had a mixed bag with that relationship, because it was also very big, cool that he wanted to coach me, but I did also live with do I have what it takes to be the starter? If if he wasn't the coach, would I have been that, so anyway, there's a push and pull there. So I wanted to give my son the freedom to say no. And, but he immediately said, oh yes, Dad, I want you to be my coach. You're like the best, blah, blah, blah. So, what else is a reflection? My daughter, she's an interesting one. She's about to be 8. Charlie's her name. She is a badass in other ways. She's tough, man. She does not challenge for her, because we'll zoom out and have the broader conversation all the time. Because one of the things I love being a dad for so many reasons. One of which is what an honor to get to help as much as I can shape a human brain and how it sees the world and what it wonders about.
All right. So for those of you that listened to the first 12 minutes of that interview, it was fire and starting to create depth. And then the universe had other plans. The recording stopped, and we had to take a few minutes to try to adjust and get us back. So if the sound looks a little different, if the video looks a little different, it's only because we pivoted, because we wanted to make sure we kept going deep. I know that where we were discussing was really in the reflection in the mirrors that were taking place with Adrian and his kids. And this idea of him being a coach for his son's team, but also really focusing on getting permission from his son. What I will say is that I have a lot of respect for the fact that you even asked that question. And as it relates to my own son, I'll just share something that I think is very relevant. My son, I have never coached formally, but I've taught him lots of things athletically.
Yeah.
And what I was noticing is the older he got and the more he got into sports, the more I was always just instinctively giving him feedback. not criticism, not judgment, always through the lens of helping him do something better, more in alignment or higher level of performance that would align with what he desired. But the older he got, the more he didn't actually receive it from me, with the exception of very specific places. And so that was a really profound turning moment for me, as maybe 2.5 years ago, he was playing football and he has coaches on the team. And I called him over to the sideline, like on a break. And I said, hey, buddy, I just want to ask you a question. He goes, what? I said, do you know how dad always wants to try to help? Always wants to give you feedback, always wants to give you insight into ways that, like, I think you can be more in alignment with what you want. He said, yeah. And I said, do you want me to just cheer you on, or do you want me to give you that feedback? And he said, I just want you to cheer me on, Dad. And there was a little bit of me that was like knife to the heart. But on the same token, I was like, you know what? Like, this is really powerful that not only I had a moment of clarity to be able to ask him that so that he didn't feel the shame, the blame, the pressure, the judgment, the criticism. Because even though that wasn't my intent, if he doesn't want it, he's not willing to receive it, he's never going to hear it for what I intend. Right. And at the same time, I know that I just want to be dad. You said something about being an advocate for humans. Mm-hmm. And since we're on the realm of talking about kids, I want to share with you that my wife and I, when we first had kids, said that we really wanted to make sure that we got a few things right. By the way, we're fucking up a lot of stuff, and we are definitely creating trash from their past that we're going to be helping them unpack for years. We're doing the best we can, and we're owning whatever we are conscious of. But the intent coming into this was we want our kids to know who they are. Yeah. We want them to love who they are. And we want them to be able to advocate for who they are, as well as I want them to know that they are loved unconditionally, no matter what, by their mother and I. Yep. Now, the reality of it is we believe that if they can do that, then they can get to know other people, they can learn to love other people, and they can advocate for other people. Yeah. And it's been really cool at 8 and 10 to see how that's already coming into fruition. Just because I feel like there can be multiple definitions and interpretations of it. What does it specifically mean for you to be an advocate for humans? And at what point in your life did that become an area that you identified with and you put focus and energy towards?
Yeah. So I think the phrase I used, because I use it all the time, is a fierce advocate for humans. Fierceness has just kind of kicked into gear in recent years. So advocating, and I think in the general sense is I will help them get clear about what they want, and then I'm going to stand shoulder to shoulder with them and give everything I got. And even if the giving is giving less, kind of like with your son, the story about your son, is just to, okay, I'm not going to do all this because actually this guy wants me to say less, to be, to feel like I'm with him. But helping them fight for what they want, and fierce, in a sense, is being willing to do it in some unconventional ways. I really usually in the work context means I'm going to put the relationship on the line every single conversation, meaning people don't pay me to be their cheerleader. They want cheerleading, which is cool, and I don't mind being their cheerleader, but I usually make the joke and warn them. It's like, if you're looking for a cheerleader, call your mama. That's great. Call her. She thinks you're awesome. If I believe in you in the way that no one else in your life has ever believed in you, that means I'm going to not believe you most of the time, which is a very weird relationship.
Say that one more time, because I want to make sure that the audience hears that. That was a really profound statement.
Sure. So to believe in them and to believe what's possible for them and that they can achieve more than anything they've ever done before. Beyond all their hopes and dreams, beyond all their fears and concerns. To believe in them means that a majority of the time, I won't believe them. Meaning that they're going to do what their brain is wired to do, which is to survive, to look good and feel good and be right and be in control. They don't have a vote on that. That's what the wiring's doing. That's gravity for human beings. That's the drift, is to survive, to play, not to lose, which means they're not going to be fully throated and honest about current reality, and they're going to usually hold back on what's possible, like in those two domains, future and present, like not claim everything they really want, and then not be fully sober and honest about current reality. That's how we deal with like our own fears and concerns and our worst case scenarios in our head. Lower the vision or bullshit about the moment. And so I'm going to not believe them And for them, though, that's the difference. And I'm not some police on what the truth is. I just know human beings. I know myself, and I know I've been doing this a long time. And we need anybody that works with me is paying me to be the most honest person they've ever had a conversation with, and to believe beyond their own bullshit about what they can't do. So we cut to the chase rather quickly. And, and before I sign anybody else to do the coaching work I do, I always, it's usually happens something like this. Like we're on a call and we're getting to know each other, and it's 99% of my clients come because they know somebody I've worked with. So we're talking about, oh, Harry, great. Oh, da, da, da. Oh, what were you talking about at lunch that Harry said we ought to, that's usually like nice little clues on what's going on for them. What were you guys talking about when Harry said, hey, you ought to talk to my guy, Adrian? Sounds like you're up against it, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll tell me what that is, and I'll listen. And then usually around 12 minutes in, I say, hey, hey, Brian, we don't know each other very well. Mind if I take a risk with you? And they'll say, sure. I think you're full of it, man. I don't believe you. And here's why. And I'll tell them da, 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 da. And then we're off to the races. And however they respond to that, and I might be a little bit more nuanced than that, but I want to challenge them so that to see if they're able to get outside themselves or just protect the fortress. Are they able to get outside and look and see and wonder about something that might have stricken me as inauthentic or inconsistent or something that's going on? Because if they don't have any sense of wonder and don't have any sense of either humility today or a desire to have some humility, which transformation requires, then we ought not talk, because we're going to battle, and I'm going to fight for what's possible for you. You're going to fight for your limitations. And if you want you to win, that's a dumb idea. But if you want me to win, like, I'm fighting for what's possible for you. You need to want me to win. You're going to fight for what a better version of yesterday instead of what's possible. So I typically challenge, and if they don't want that, that's great. We just don't work together, because it'd be a massive waste of time and money for them, and just boring for me. And I'm like trying to talk them into doing something. Like, no, this is not the ballgame.
Yeah. You and I are extremely aligned, and the more we talk, the more I realize that. Often people ask me, they say, so who's an ideal client for you? Who's going to be the person that's good for working with you, and who's not? And it always comes down to a really simple statement. If someone doesn't have the interest or the courage to stand in their truth, they're not ready to work with me. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what I also say to every single person, and I think there's a slight nuance in the difference in how this goes, is that often what I see is accurate, but I also don't care about being right. I care about getting it right. And that's so great. What I also do, in the light of asking for permission to give feedback, I love that you said that. And you're like, hey, do you mind if I get bold a second? I think often asking for permission before we give feedback creates a space that allows us to see more truth. And not everybody's going to lean into that. Not everybody's going to take advantage of that. But your ability to be able to navigate that is powerful. And, the nuance that I want to come back to in a few minutes is this whole idea of, like, does your client win or do you win? And I actually want to challenge that thought process. In fact, since we're here, I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to go somewhere else with it.
Bring it.
I, through the lens of my own work, have shifted pretty dramatically from this concept and idea of I've been a fighter my whole life to I only started to get what I actually wanted when I learned to surrender. That doesn't mean give up. That doesn't mean bend over. That doesn't mean take it, right? But it's a different lens. And fighting for me often forces aside, right? It means someone wins and someone loses, which only reinforces the zero-sum game, right? And so what I would like to understand is, how do you utilize this concept of winning within your approach with your clients? And at the end of the day, like, is it really someone winning, or is it actually something else?
Yeah, well, just to, I guess, restate like my view and what I say to them, and I'll do this all the time, and we've got these leadership trainings called the Revenant Process, 4-day deep dive, no holds barred, amazing. Love it. And I usually say it there as well to the whole group that, hey, at some point during the training, I'm going to be fighting for what's possible for you, and you're going to be fighting for your limitations. And I'll ask in that context, who do you want to win? Now, winning in that context is that what I'm saying might be more or like as true or more true than their story about why they can't do something. Yep. So winning actually isn't about winning. It's just like, oh, look, there's more here. Yep. And you think you can't share in a room. You think you can't, like, explore you think you can't, and you've just got big stories about it. They're not new. They've been around for a long time. For
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
I mean, most of all of human BS comes, it's been around since the world began. So nothing's really new. None of their thoughts are actually their thoughts. They're just thoughts that happen to be occupying their body at the moment. Because like, there's no deception that's, at least less than 2,000 years old. It's all been
Yeah.
around since the jump. So, so when I say winning, I mean essentially, I mean, like, if you try on my idea, might more resource open up for you? That's what I
Yeah.
mean by winning. It's not like I'm winning and they're losing. Actually, they win, quote unquote, if I'm right.
Bingo.
Because I'm standing in a possibility. I'm on this, I'm having this view for them that they don't currently have, and they're losing by not losing, whatever. We can chuck
Yep.
the whole language, but their life gets smaller and
Yeah.
their capacity shrinks if they keep believing that their version of their truth is the only truth that's available instead of
Yep.
what else is possible for them.
By the way, that's where I believed you were coming from when you said
Yeah.
it. But again, just for absolute clarity, I wanted to slow down because I think that's a really small nuance, right? And I don't get the sense that you go into battle and fight with your clients. You hold them in truth. And you hold them in a space that's allowing them to evaluate truth. And ultimately, there are multiple truths in some situations, right? But in the pragmatic reality, it's about helping them evolve to see themselves and the situations around them more clearly. And that's what I heard, but I wanted to make sure that everyone else heard the same thing.
Right on. And pretty similar to what you said earlier, too. Usually a question I'll ask just to let them, I always want to let people know exactly what I'm up to in the conversation. We're talking about clientele here. I said there's going to be two questions that are going to matter the most, which is, first one is, how much truth can you handle? And second is, how much courage can you summon? And depending on wherever, we're human beings, and certain days I'm going to be up for it, some days I'm not, or whatever. And so there's tons of grace in the process, because I've got days when I'm in a slump and blah, blah, blah. But like, how much truth can I handle? Like, and truth in this regard means current reality. Results tell the truth. We don't. What does, what's happening? We'll say that's the truth, that like your impact equals your intention.
Yep.
Not, I thought or I intended to, but this, no. Let's try on the idea that whatever's happening is what you want to have happened.
Yeah.
That's a gutsier question.
Adrian, I fucking love you, bro. You and I say a lot of the same things in slightly different language. It's a really beautiful, beautiful thing, my friend, because, God, I literally, even that example, I just took something from you as well, because again, those two questions I've actually never asked, and they are exactly in alignment with the way that I view how I coach. You saw what happened pre-show, and you were like, oh, I really like how you framed that, right? It's all about getting people to understand the space and my intent. And often I believe that the greatest amount of resistance that exists within people is in one of two areas, either the misalignment between their intellectual and emotional narratives, or between their intent and the actual outcome based on their actions. Yeah. And we've said for years that the world will never judge you based on your intent. The world will always judge you based on your actions. And so if you are not being seen for your intent, it's time to change your actions. And it's one of those things that I love that you were like, is your impact in congruence with your intent? That's exactly what it's about. Yeah. You also used some language early in the interview that I haven't heard a whole lot of people use, but I have said many, many times. I've said for a whole long period of time that I ultimately had to get back to who I was before the world told me who to be. And you said that you lived your life based on who the world told you who to be for 35 years. Yeah. Could you give a little bit of insight into how into who the world told you to be in your first 35 years of life, and maybe some of those foundational moments earlier in your life that ingrained some intellectual or emotional beliefs that shaped your life? Yeah. Let's see. Well, the first place, let me kick over in a second to talk psychology just for a second. And if people, I'm sure if they're listening to this show, they're people that if they're a seeker, if they're listening to this show and they like to read cool stuff and like to integrate or try things on. So a book that I have all my clients read is called The Courage to be Disliked. Have you really heard this book before? I have. Yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's not as bombastic as the title. It's not about how to be a jerk and like that. It's not. Written by a couple, Japanese, Koga and Kashimi, I think is the guy's name. Anyway,
sold 5 million copies in Japan before they brought it over here. The book is actually a survey of Freudian psychology as it stands against or next to Adlerian psychology. And I only bring this up because it's useful for this answer.
Mm-hmm.
So Freud is an etiological view. Let me nerd out for a second. Etiological, like I am my history. That's what Freud said.
Yep.
We love that one. We love it. It's perfect for the human being. It's like, oh,
Yep.
I'm not my decisions today. I'm what happened. That's why you sit down in any psychologist chair or therapist chair. God bless therapists. Go get them. That's where they're going to go. Oh, you're having this experience. When did that begin? We go
Yeah.
historical. Now, that's fine. There's not a lot of power in that. No, very little power in that. Now, there might be insight, which can be helpful. Adler, same time frame, very different view. I am what I'm committed to. I am my purpose, a teleological view, which is what he said. So I am the future that I'm set on. We know that that's actually more true than Freud now, but we didn't know that back then. So one of the things Adler said, which I think is fascinating, which connects to the answer to this question. He has what he calls life lies. And his thing is this, is that a lot of times we can, as human beings, we, buy some lie about ourselves. And then if we don't watch it, we spend our whole lives trying to prove that lie isn't true. So a couple of them for me, present day, always there for me in the background. That may be a 2 out of 10 volume for me. One is that I'm not very smart. I think about that all the time. I'm not very smart. Now, there's plenty of evidence why that's not true. It doesn't matter. There's always I can't hang with the heavyweights. Ironically, I coach but really brilliant people, and I hang with them just fine. And they, we do long engagements with lots of money involved and lots of influence and connection to everybody in their freaking lives, whatever. But anyway, that's a thing in my head that it's like I'm not. Now, I was smart early, and then like, I don't know, before high school, I was, above the class and whatever. And then at some point in high school and then into college, I'm like, maybe I don't have, maybe, essentially when I had to start working for it, I didn't have great study habits and stuff. I was naturally very smart and kind of bright, picked stuff up early, definitely in any kind of relational dynamic. I could pick that up. But, to myself, I didn't have a lot of vigor and didn't have a lot of discipline around studying. So I hit a wall when it came to learning formally. I don't learn that formally, period. Now I've learned very relationally. But my other main one to connect to your question was, like, in my family, I was odd. I was different than like kind of the norm. And it's my dad, my mom, and my brother. And what was odd about me is I was what they called deep, or quote unquote too serious. And I would get comments like that all the time growing up, especially from my dad, because I think he was most intimidated by it. Like, he was, Aid, and not everything's too as serious. Why do you have to get all psychological or philosophical on it? Like, why? So I spent so many years of my life trying not to be the serious guy or not to be the intense guy. That also came up through like, Aid, you're so intense. Like, why don't you lighten up? And so then I spent so many years of my life trying to, like, I don't know, work on my humor, or like read the newspaper, or like talk about headlines of things that, like, quote unquote normal people do. And what a waste. I
Yeah,
mean,
man.
not a bad skill set to, like, I do, I do goof off now and I use my levity. I mean, one of the biggest gifts to me is how much my children generate play and playfulness. Like,
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
goofball dad. I love being a goofball dad. I dance in every store we go into just to embarrass them. And it's a blast. And I love being on the ground and goofing off and just, if they're going to walk on the rail to try to balance, I'm doing it too. I'm just all in, like, play dad. But there was forever a conversation about, hey man, you ought to relax. People don't like your I was going to say depth, but like really your heaviness. And then it took me a long time to realize, yeah, the wrong people don't like it.
Yeah.
And not wrong, like bad wrong. I mean, like, people that I ought not hang with need me to be lighter than me. The people that I am meant to be with, they love my depth. They aren't intimidated by it at all. They're not like, because I'm just probably very similar to you. I want to talk about the real shit as soon as possible. We can talk about the Dodgers if you want. I don't give a shit about the Dodgers. I don't, the weather,
Yep.
whatever, get the fuck out of here. I want to talk about what's really going on and like the 5 layers into the social interaction, not just the content. It's the
Yeah.
context that's interesting to me and like who someone is, what they're up to, what they want, what they're scared of. I want to be in that conversation. That's
Yeah.
like my own salvation, like being willing to consistently be committed to self-awareness, knowing that I'm aware of some things, unaware of most things. And that's the joy. That's the discovery. So that's all like deep for certain people, which is cool. It's like really normal for me and my closest friends.
I do resonate with lots of it. I've been called intense, right? I've been called I go too deep, it's too
Yeah.
heavy. But
Yeah.
also it's one of those things that I realize, right? I mean, anything that lacks depth doesn't interest me.
Yeah.
Period.
You said
Like
that so
it doesn't
clearly.
it doesn't light me up. It doesn't. And so I just don't engage when it's surface level, and
Yep.
or I'll challenge to see if I can take something deeper. And
Yep.
if it's not there, or I can tell it's not being received, I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend my energy elsewhere. And that
Yep.
doesn't mean I'm going to be rude or a dick, right? Or like, and that's the other side of it is I think it's interesting because at least for me, my big energy in that depth was also delivered through a lot of armor for a lot of years,
Okay.
which is confusing as fuck for people, right? Because they don't know how to receive it, right? When you've got a big energy and it's being delivered through some level of armor or self-protection, they don't know what it means. It's not real. It's not as authentic.
Yep.
And I'm in a place in my life where I'd like to say all of the ego that I'm aware of is gone, right? Yep. I don't know of any other area that I'm existing in a place of ego or self-preservation. But
Yep.
what that also is done is it's opened me to actually be able to be seen in a deeper way. And I also attract more people that are within my kind of frequency environment, right? And so I love that that was kind of a part of your path. Now, you've mentioned your dad a few times.
Yeah.
You made a joke about all the judgments about him a little bit earlier, but you also have talked about like where some of these narratives were really coming from a byproduct of his insecurity as it related to you and some of the different dynamics. Are there any moments earlier in your life as it related to you and your father that you now can look back on and realize that you inherited some generational patterns as a man or as a father from him?
Sure. Yes. A couple things. Let's see, 2 or 3 come to mind. One is, I mean, I know things about my dad, even to this day, that he doesn't know that I know, because his father and I were very close. His dad, his name was Charles Adrian Koehler, so I get my name from him. And he and I were very close. I had all 4 grandparents until I was like 30, which is cool. And I got very unique relationships with each one. And he and I were very close. He was like the troublemaker in the family. He was like the guy that would say anything. He was brash and very loving, extremely generous, just didn't give a shit. You know, he just said whatever was on his mind, which in the pretty conservative, evangelical, small town of where I grew up, that didn't quite work, but I thought it was cool. It was like probably the first person I was around that was like into like full expression, like unfiltered, like just say what's there. So I was always inspired to be with him. And he told me a lot about my dad. And I bring it up because he told me a lot about his life before mom. And my dad doesn't. My dad didn't. Even later in life, you know, I had been engaged and got distant, and then we broke off the marriage like 2 months before the wedding. And I knew that my dad had been engaged to somebody before my mom. But he had never told me about it. Even when his son was going through a massive heartbreak, he didn't even say, "Hey, Adrian, something I've never told you is that I went through this, man, and I've been where you are, and here's how I got through it." Now, I don't know why, but even I asked him, it was kind of a dick move. We're in the car, and I asked him, "Hey, have you ever, you know, did you ever love anybody before mom?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, I know you were engaged." You know, so that was a trick question and not the kindest thing. You know, I was still working on some of my disappointment
You
and
were
anger
learning,
and
bro.
stuff like
I mean,
that.
it was
I was
learning
learning.
and growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that side of it, like, you know, there's been definitely seasons of my life where I didn't want to put my arms around my dark side, things I wasn't, you know, proud of and things I was ashamed of or secrets and all that kind of stuff. And I lived a double life for many years and that kind of stuff. And obviously you get that from somewhere. I think I got that, And partially, I don't know if I got it from my dad. I saw it in my dad. I mean, what else? There was another answer that hit me. Um, you know, there's an aspect of me that I'm up against now, like as I'm single again and like, almost looking for a serious relationship. And my father, he hasn't husbanded my mother very well, in my
Mm,
opinion.
mm,
In the sense that he just kind of lays over and like gives her like whatever you want, honey, and just kind of tries to stay out of trouble. And I can do that. I mean, I tend to like react to that inside of myself by like really working to make sure that I'm not doing that. So that's kind of my reaction. I can be a little bit too harsh at times and kind of a little bit reactive to that narrative, but that kind of people pleasy
yep,
side of my pops, which, you know what? It generates a lot of beauty in the world. And he's like the sweetest guy on the planet. And if you call Jim, he'll do whatever. And so there's a part of it that's baked in kindness for sure for him.
yep,
And there's also just an unexpressed, unwilling to face the fire. I mean, my mother, I think, would have been really served to have a strong masculine presence that said, "Hey, honey, you got to stop talking about people.
yeah,
Doesn't work here," or "Stop nagging the kids. Doesn't you need like giving her boundaries, guidance would have been a big gift to her because I
mm,
think she is secondarily like kind of felt a little alone in the world, and they're like quote unquote best friends. They hang out all the time. They didn't have many friends out. I mean, they were involved in this church community and stuff, but like as far as like close confidants, they didn't really have that. They just kind of had quote unquote had each other. I put that in quotes because
yeah,
the nuances of the relationship, it wasn't that deep and it wasn't that communicative. And whenever uh, she would have complaints about him, he would like back out. You're right. You're right. Just kind of not even have a conversation about it. So those two things come to mind, like the people pleasing side of things, and then the unwillingness to what I call now hug the cactus.
mm. Explain the hug the cactus. I want that's
Sure.
a fascinating term.
Yeah, it's a metaphor from the Desert Fathers, old Christian tradition in like Egypt area. The meaning and Jungian psychology connects into it. It's like shadow self. Like, what is it about me that I don't want to see, don't want to talk about, that I'm willing to see and willing to talk about? And if you go further, it's actually to embrace this.
Mm,
Like I know I am influential, but I also know as I am manipulative. I'm very good at getting people to do whatever I want them to do.
yeah,
Now
that's a fine
that
line, right?
it's
Yeah,
and I'm just
yeah,
saying it's both, right? It's like
I get it totally.
if I'm insecure and if I'm about myself and if I want to use somebody, I'm good, man. I know how to phrase a text. I know how to, put a very pregnant pause in a conversation and it works in like lots of situations when I'm like, negotiating with customer service or doing whatever the heck I want to do. I know how to get people to do shit. Now, there's an aspect of that I've manipulated myself and manipulated other people for significantly and have obliterated them or hurt me or hurt, other people. And I need to own that this is a neutral gift. Where I'm coming from and what I'm committed to generates either the power and the virtue in it and the beauty in it, or if it's dark and I'm going to take people down with me and probably live in a story about why it's their fault or something else like that. And I, paint myself as innocent when I know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
So hugging the cactus is to embrace what would have been usually where the shame is,
yep,
embrace that as a gift, where so that now becomes the enemy, like the thing that if it happens, I'm a bad person and people won't love me and blah, 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 all those stories we have without a vote, that's always going to happen. Embrace those as my friends. So come on in. Like when shame comes, come on in. You probably have something to tell me. Let's talk.
yeah. It's beautiful. I love the way you communicate, and thank you for being vulnerable. It's not surprising to me that you continue to lean into the questions and you're given fire answers. I love that concept, and I really want to focus specifically on how you answered that question as well.
Yeah.
What was one time in your life that you manipulated yourself for so long? How did you identify it? How did you get out of it?
Yeah. It's hard not to think about the so many examples coming to mind right now. I mean, the biggest one. Let's see. Let me tell a short story. A little bit of work background just to get us connected here. So I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was like pre-med guy in
Mm-hmm.
college and thought, nah, I don't want to do that. I had a roommate that was a nursing major, ended up getting a nursing degree. Big faith. There's a lot here, but anyway, faith was a big part of my life, and at least the notion of putting the world back together and being a part of a redemptive force, that's cool for me. And anyway, got a nursing degree, didn't want to be a nurse, worked at a hospital, was on a team in India, doing some work, missionary type work, charitable work, and heard a message from a guy named Erwin McManus called The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization. And I thought, ding, this guy, he's got the music. I move out to Los Angeles, read all of his books, move out to Los Angeles to work at the church. Did that for several years. I'll skip over all those details. After I left working at the church, it's because I was invited to run a foundation. Now, I'd gone from being in like Christian leadership. I'd been in Christian leadership since I was a kid. I prayed the prayer. And if anybody doesn't know what that means, anyway, came from like a traditional Christian background and
Yep.
said, okay, Jesus is the dude. He's my guy, blah, blah, blah. When I was a little kid, 8 years old. And I'd been leading since then, just because that was the norm in my family. We led shit, and it's not a very tough thing to lead. And if the person that stands up and has an idea usually can run that show.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I was always doing that: high school, college, out of college, doing that. Now, the trick for that is now there's a whole set of beliefs and expectations around your morality, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing and it's a helpful thing. And in that, if you're going to wear this Christian leader thing, there's an expectation of what you're doing and what you're not doing. And I was just kind of cruising through that and trying my best. And of course, porn here and a little bit of drinking there, and a little bit of premarital sex over here, kind of deal with that or not deal with that or whatever, just kind of keep cruising through. When I got out of the
Yep.
formal role as a pastor, I was pretty lost. Because I'd realized that I'd used some of those expectations to really frame who I was. I didn't know it. I mean, this is how I can talk about it now. But at that time when I got out, the whole thing felt really, really inauthentic for me. Like I didn't want to like pray and journal and um, uh, serve other people. Was I just doing that? Like, was that
Yeah.
me, or was I just faking it for, this long? Long story short, got out, got this job, made a shit ton more money, a lot of a new type of influence. I mean, I was traveling the world speaking and blah, blah, blah back then, but this is like distinct, and I'm representing
Yeah.
millions and millions of dollars, and people are calling me all the time now. And I started drinking, and I like drinking. It was great. And then I started drinking more and started drinking more. And then I loved it. Wasn't like a problem for me. It was relieving for me. I think
Mm.
a sense of anxiety had shown up for me that I wasn't as comfortable without. When I was doing this more entrepreneurial journey, I was more uncomfortable than when I was just kind of doing what I knew I needed to do.
Yeah.
And anyway, drinking was a part of that. Didn't take long for me to then had the first time I was out, saw a pretty girl, took off my ring, and
Mm.
didn't take too long for me to be unfaithful with my wife, and then didn't take too long for that to also become a part of a lifestyle. So that's when I generated these kind of two versions of Adrian. There's the one that you would have met on the street and we would have been talking
Yeah.
and cool and blah, 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 and great family life and da, 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 da. And then there's this very despairing Adrian that's really out of control, that's utilizing drinking and women in order to deal with my own sense of lack of self. Like, who the
Yeah.
hell am I? How do I know? And so this became a pretty much a very deep, when you said, like, is there a period of time? It was like a 5 year period of time there that I was lying to myself. I was going to say daily, not daily, like lying to myself every few minutes. And, keeping up these habits that were demoralizing for me, eventually demoralizing for my then wife. And, just heading towards despair in
Yeah.
despair, but then just, it was going to get deeper. I thought I'll just hold on to this until I get caught, I guess, or I'll just live with this as long as I can. I'll just live with these secrets, kind of back to some of the conversations I inherited from dad, and just live with some of these secrets. And, I was totally lost. and I knew I was lost, but I was too proud to, raise my
Mm,
hand, face the music, and ask for help. I mean, eventually, I had lied enough to my then wife, who's an amazing person, by the way. I'd lied enough to her. I got busted in a lie. And my negotiating chip was to go to an AA meeting. It was like early August, and I'll go to an AA meeting before the end of the month. That was kind of my leave me alone. So I did. It was August 30th. I went to an AA meeting and talked to all these guys, and in a room full of 15 dudes at a cafe in Beverly Hills, and I didn't know what to talk about. And they said, "Newcomers, do you want to share something?" Sure. But I don't know what to share. And this guy named Neil, who has since passed, he leaned over to me and said the most scary idea I'd ever heard. He said he had like these throat issues, and he just said, "Share how you feel." And I thought, you don't want to hear how I feel, man, because I was like very suicidal,
yeah.
entertaining it all the time. Like, not like had a gun or blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, I should drive my car off this hill, and
Yep.
I can probably get enough speed, slam on the brakes so it looks like I try to stop, and then end the whole thing. And before I get found out, and they'll line up around the block because I was a good guy. And, but I started talking and I lost it. And that meeting, they just clap for you, and then they move on to the next guy, which I thought, first off, I opened my eyes and I wasn't dead. That was surprising. I thought that the truth would kill me. Being honest would kill me, because that's what you do
Mm,
to keep up a lie. You got to believe it's worse to be honest. You have to believe that if I'm honest, it gets worse. So that I keep the lie up, because,
mm-hmm.
lies are very satisfying on short term, obviously.
Yep.
Um, and then I was also pissed because I'm like, hey guys, I just shared with you something I've been not talking about for 5 years, and they're just laughing and clapping and going on to the next story. So like designified my own pain, which was both like a huge gift to me, but in the moment I'm like, you insensitive bastards.
Right.
And anyway, coming out of that meeting, 5 guys came and got my phone number because AA is a loving community, and 2 guys called me. I lied to both of them. 3 guys texted me. I did tell the one guy that I wasn't done drinking, and he said, no problem. Keep doing it. If you want to do some, more research and development, have fun. Just be careful. Be careful, and just call me tomorrow. Okay,
Mm,
his name was Aaron. Great Aaron, and will do. It was a Tuesday. Back then I played beach volleyball on Tuesdays, so I was drinking all day. So I drank all day, went and played beach volleyball, went to the bar like we always did. They were having their first drinks of the day. I was having my, I don't know, 12th, 13th, 14th, whatever. And on the way home, I'm trying to find a podcast. I crash a car into a parked car. So the car is
oof.
just sitting there, and I'm not, driving and trying to figure this out and pretty drunk, and crash a car. That's what woke me up. Now, as I reflect on that, I think, poetically speaking, that like that morning, and like attempting giving myself to being honest and being truthful, the romantic side of me just says that was my soul was finally taking a breath. It had been holding its
Yeah.
breath for 5 years, and finally it felt it. And so I knew I needed to be done. I hadn't like tried to stop drinking. I wasn't interested in trying to stop, but I knew I needed to be done, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm worth more than that, is like the real story. I'm worth more than that. And I'm not my worst day. I'm not my worst, perpetration. I'm not my worst lie. I'm not any of those things. And so I needed to crash that car. And I remember getting stitches in my face because I, busted my face up, and I got the DUI and all that kind of stuff. And they couldn't arrest me. They couldn't put me in jail because I had the cut. They had to send me to a hospital,
Yeah.
and they let me out, and they took pictures and did all the stuff on the hood of the police car, but they didn't let me out. And I remember pulling out my legal pad in the ER at like 3:30, 4:30 a.m. And, just saying, it might not get better, but I will get better.
Mm,
And I don't know why that came to my mind. I knew it would be true, and it was true. That it, meaning my life, meaning my feelings, meaning my externals, meaning my relationship with my wife, but it pretty much deteriorated. I mean, for a lot of my contribution, obviously, and some of hers. Um, but I know I'm going to get better. And so I went on a quest at that stage, and I lost everything. Like I lost that marriage.
yeah.
I lost the business partner. I mean, I've been lying to everybody, right? So everybody was
Yeah.
hurt and felt betrayed because I had betrayed them.
Yeah.
And, all the people of faith in my life left, and it was very heartbreaking. And I'd earned it. right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
somebody can betray me and I can forgive them.
Yep.
And I, now that I've gone through some serious shit, I put myself through serious shit. I come close to the criminals. I mean, when I'm watching a TV show and there's a good guy and a bad guy, the bad guy's my buddy. I get this guy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
which anybody that I'm in a relationship with, they're like, why do you like this guy? I'm like, don't you understand what he's up against? You know,
Yeah.
so I can always connect with people's criminal intent. That's why I think working with me, people feel relieved because they can tell me anything and I'm
Yeah.
not going to flinch at all.
That I think is one of the gifts that I give most people is my objective and non-judgmental lens. Like there's nothing that surprises me. That's one of the first things I say to every client. There is nothing you can tell me that will surprise me. There
That's
is
great.
nothing you can tell me that is going to shock me, is going to cause me to judge you. All it
Right on.
is information for me to be able to help you weed through so that you can ultimately get really, really clear.
Right
What I
on.
want to say though is I really do want to call and acknowledge not only your vulnerability, but your level of ownership.
Mm.
And even in how you talk about that whole experience, it would be very easy to wrap it up and just describe elements of what have happened and look at the facts. But you also very, very clearly separate where and how you know your actions, your decisions, your choices put you into the position. And so that level of ownership also just further ignites my clarity around your level of congruence at this point in your life. But
Yeah.
it also leads to me wanting to ask you one more question around that topic.
Hit me.
Where, if anywhere in your life, are you still lying to yourself?
Oh, I think lots of places, to be
Do you,
honest.
are you comfortable sharing one that you're aware
Oh,
of?
I'll share it. I'm not comfortable, but I'll share it.
Whatever you feel good with, then I'll let you lead. If you'll do it,
No, I'm good,
yeah.
man. I'm good. I
Okay.
mean, I'm in an active conversation with myself right now about this.
Okay.
Um, because I'm not, uh, I'm able to be of service to other people, but I'm not in my best shape right now.
Mm.
And I don't mean like I mean physically in some regard. I could lose a few pounds, but I'm in this season of life. So I was married once, had kids, and then
Yep.
there was a break, and then I got married again. Um, and we don't have much time, so I'll try to keep this story a little bit short.
Yep.
But we fell hard, and I'm a hard lover. I mean, I'm in, and I'm a committed dude, and I like building shit. I'm in,
Yep.
and there's definitely a part of that relationship where there was some of her dysfunction I was hooked into and I could help and I love helping. And she was impressive for like a gajillion reasons, very impressive and a very successful entrepreneur, guest shark on Shark Tank, build a huge company. Anyway, she's one of the early boss babe type people.
Okay.
And she was a babe, of course, and impressive. And what do I want to say publicly? There were just things that was going
Yeah.
on that weren't ideal. And yet me and my dysfunction thinks I can make that better.
Yeah.
That'll change. It's
Yeah.
okay. I can convert that, whatever the natural sales guy in me, the natural evangelist in me is like, where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm full of will. Let's go. And anyway, I talked myself into that relationship and there was plenty of good things, right? So I talked myself into it and ignored a ton of things that in my right mind, they weren't bad. They just weren't anywhere close to what's worthy
Mm.
and anywhere close to what I'm worthy of. And I rarely use that language, just because it's so dripping with entitlement for a lot of
Yep.
people,
Yep.
or it's just so lame. It's like, anyway, I'm sorry. I won't do 10 minutes on that, but,
You and I could probably talk for a day straight. So
we could,
I mean,
man,
easy.
and we ought to,
And we're going to. I would love that. Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, the relationship got really bad. It got toxic enough that I finally started talking about all the issues because I talked about the issues and had people involved. And then when it got to a certain place, it's like, dude, would you just shut up, man? Just deal with it, and I can deal with shit. So whatever, tie it off. I'm fine, not fine, but I'll act fine and I'll just keep being of service and maybe I'll get through every day and I can do this for 40 years.
Yep.
But I was filled with some shame about it because like, what the hell was I doing? Why did I do this? And what are people and embarrassed in some ways, like do other people see what I see?
Yeah.
Anyway, so it got really bad in May of last year and it got so bad, I finally started talking again about it. And the guys in my life that are brilliant guys family-centered guys, loving guys, loved her. They're like, you can't, no, this won't work, especially when it came to my children. So I won't give all the details about that, but it just didn't work very well.
Yeah.
So I left, and then I dated around a little bit, and then started dating and got back in the app world, and first time ever in the app world. And man, my personality and my skill set, I'm a assassin.
I believe that. I believe that.
So,
and you got a nice big old burly beard too. So you attract probably very, very well.
It works. It works. So when I say, is there any place, or you ask essentially the question, any place where I'm deceiving myself? I feel at times, really out of control. Like I'll just, and part of it's from something, immature about me, where it's like, because I know a lot of it's about attention.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it is like just plain up cowardice. Because if I wasn't going on tons of dates, then I would have all this space in my life where I'd like face the creative dilemma where it's like, hey man, you're called to this. And if you give yourself the space, you could read more, of course, or listen more, or just face the blank page and get really creative. And so I've been using that for the last several months to avoid my deepest calling, which is to go make a deeper and bigger and a more expansive impact. And so, I think about this a lot. I only bring it up here because you asked me, and it's uncomfortable to share, but it is, but it's true. And like the more, what is it? Shame craves the darkness, something like that.
Yeah.
And so to talk about it is my own gift to myself.
That is something that I'll say very, very clearly. My purpose and existence in life is to allow my truth to give others permission to live theirs. Right. I believe that the sources of suffering come in four places: the things that are left unsaid, the things we lack permission to feel or say, the things we lack the words to articulate or understand, or the things that are left undone. So not only every time do I speak about my own stuff, does it alleviate suffering for myself, but it gives permission and words to articulate and understand for others. We are right up at the tight element of time, and I want to be cognizant and respectful. I've got a bunch of other questions I would love to ask you. We're just going to have to pick it up and do this another way and another time.
I'd love it.
What I would like to do is, could you please let people know where to find you and reference? I know Revenant is something that is of value that people could benefit from. So give a little insight to that. I'll wrap the show, and then we'll reconnect.
Great. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram, Adrian.K, Adrian.K. Find me there. DM me. If you have any questions, want to spend some time together, tell me you came from Brian and I'll give you some time. Just to explore. He mentioned the Revenant process. Most of my work is in-house with founders of companies and their leadership teams and all that. And if you're one of those people, great. We could talk about your business. It's always going to be very personal. We also do these public trainings called the Revenant process, 4-day deep dive gymnasium for the soul. We want to get clear on the results in your life and see what type of thinking is currently governing that and governing, so it's really a conversation about legacy. You get tons of feedback. It's really not for the faint of heart, but if you're a badass and listen to Brian, you would love it. You would love it. We just surveyed like 2,000 people and 97% of them said it was one of the top 3 experiences of their life. So
I believe that.
It's killer. We are Revenant, REVENANT.com. Check it out. We've got one in April. This will probably drop after that in Los Angeles that I'm going to be the lead at. We got one in Hawaii coming up in June. We'll do another one in third or fourth quarter. We're still lining that out now. So come check it out. Love anybody that's in your tribe, man. We would hit it off right away.
Yeah, I have no doubt. Where there's so much alignment, you and I are going to do some really cool shit together, and I'm going to make sure that you get more impact into the world as well. So thank you for being with us. Truly, it's been a pleasure. And for those of you that watched Adrian jump in and flip his lid, oh man, he brought the truth. He brought the reality. He brought ownership. He brought congruence. And oh, by the way, he recognizes that every time he speaks about all of the things that had kept him stuck, all the ways he lied to himself, not only does it free him in this current moment, but it also allows you to have the perspective to give yourself permission to lean in and do the work that's necessary. But it will require you to flip open your lid and scan your can.
What you can probably tell by now is that I love telling these stories, but what I love even more is the impact that's coming from them. You see, we're on a mission to impact over 1 billion lives as quickly as possible, but to do that, we need you. See, we believe that moved people move people. And so all I'm asking is if you've resonated, connected with any of the messaging, please consider commenting, sharing, leave a rating and review. Thank you so much for tuning into Flipping the Lid. And if you want more information on the show, how to become a guest, how to recommend a guest, or any of the other details, head over to flippingthelid.com. We'll see you there.